straight up 6 o'clock in Houston, and I'm always interested to hear from our audience where everyone is. And if you'd like to type your name and your location in the chat, we're just so excited to have you here and to hear the important message that Frank has to share with us tonight. I'm Dr. Lindsay Pollock, Provost at Sarasota University. And I just would like to remind everyone that Sarasota does offer a bachelor's completion program, and we're launching high school dual enrollment this fall with Bridgemont Montessori School. We're super excited about that. So we have the bachelor's completion program, Masters of Arts in Montessori Education or Montessori Leadership, and we also have a doctoral program. So if you're interested in earning your doctorate, and if you've started a doctorate somewhere else and you'd like to come to Sarasota to complete your doctorate in Montessori education, we'd love to talk to you about that as well. But now for the really important message tonight, and that is my friend, I am honored to call you a friend, Frank. Frank E. George IV is a lifelong educator, community builder, and advocate for children. He is AMI certified as an administrator and Montessori guide at the 3 to 6 and 6 to 12 levels and holds an Oregon State K-12 English Language Arts teaching credential. He currently serves as head of school and primary guide at Rock Creek Montessori School. Suffice it to say, Frank is not only very qualified, but he's an incredible human. His work blends authentic Montessori practice with a strong commitment to justice and equity. He believes Montessori education is a powerful vehicle for nurturing independence, dignity, and compassion, and that strong communities are built when we intentionally amplify diverse voices and support one another in meaningful work. And so thank you again, Frank, for being here tonight and for sharing this important message. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. I feel honored to be a friend to you as well. And yes, welcome and thank you so much to talk about rewilding stewardship, Montessori leadership, and late stage capitalism. That's a lot of terms, a lot of big words that, I feel like are a part of what I do in my work, as we'll discuss, and kind of what I mean when I use those words. And we'll be exploring what it might mean for you and your communities and whatever roles you are working in. Um, so of course, Lindsay already gave me that introduction, so thank you so much. I've been doing this work in Montessori for, gosh, this will be my seventh year in Montessori. I think the only thing that I would add that somewhat comes up in my work is that in the beginning of my Montessori work and throughout, it's been oftentimes very integrated with Franciscan values and my personal values as a Franciscan, and that how I approach this work as a service to humanity and particularly with that theme of humility that I love so much and love of nature. That was rooted in my very first Montessori school that I worked at out in Portland, and so that is a theme that has carried on with me. Um, and a little bit about my school. I thought it would be good to share because really everything I do is kind of an experiment. It's an experiment from the ideas that I had from when I began this work, and sometimes, was very encouraged by people around me, but also sometimes heard messages that, my idea that's not possible or that just could never work or whatnot. And so really, I'm so incredibly humbled to work as the leader of Rock Creek Montessori School. It is truly I believe, the best place to work in the world. It's the best place I've ever spent my time. And this past year as head of school has truly, I think, been arguably the best year of my life. And so, some information about Rock Creek Montessori School as we frame it. We are a school that serves 41 children, about 36 families. We have one young children's community or a toddler level and two children's houses that go up to kindergarten. We are, as of this year, the most affordable, authentic Montessori school in Montgomery County, Maryland, serving our age range. And we are also, to our knowledge, the most affordable Montessori kindergarten on the East Coast that we know of. And these are accomplishments that we made this year through some intentional decisions about how we're going to continue to run our school. And we are coming up on our 24th year. We have a total of 10 staff members, counting myself, and we are at present classified as a for-profit company. That is the structure that I have inherited and am stewarding on behalf of the owner of the school. So that's just the frame to have kind of in the background as we talk. And then a quick note on critical theory before we begin. I was thinking about some of the things that I'm going to talk about and how my background in the humanities was really one to question and to examine everything that is before us, whether it's an idea or a book or anything, just from a frame of wondering and embodying curiosity. And so I think that's what I really want to center tonight, that sometimes, some of the things we're going to be talking about are things that are very strongly held for a lot of us. We have different backgrounds, different perspectives about words and what they mean for us. And so this is really just an encouraging of us to examine what all of these things mean for us. And spoiler alert, it gets to mean whatever we want it to mean for our community and for ourselves as people. So, what is rewilding? This term is something that's really embedded in my work as a Montessorian and as a person in general. Rewilding is really, it's a permaculture concept that really in that field means to allow the land and human communities that are built upon it to return to their natural wild forms. It's the belief that with minimal human involvement, that the systems governing biotic and abiotic factors of the living and the non-living of the whole universe will naturally find a balance and a harmony with one another. And when I first encountered this term, I really I immediately thought about the first great story. As a Montessorian who was first an elementary guide, it's like, everything follows its laws and everything finds its balance and comes into harmony. And that's always changing, but it's always trying to find that rhythm of harmony. Um, in around late 2023, I would say there was not very much application of the term rewilding outside of the permaculture field. If you looked it up, you were going to see how to change your yard into a eco habitat, how to correct the banks of a stream that had been straightened. And a colleague of mine, Taylor Christman, and I began to use the term in spiritual and personal evolution workshops that we were facilitating together. When I was in between jobs, I also work in metaphysical spaces, so it was something we led personal workshops on, like how to rewild yourself, how to rewild your mindset about money or different things. And it was amazing because by the spring of 2024, we saw that other people were starting to use it really spontaneously and not in our circles. And I bring that part up because, it's really fascinating to see sometimes ideas or even tools and inventions throughout history emerge in different places around the same time. One example is knitting, that without interaction of trade, that knitting was discovered around the same time or invented around the same time in multiple places without contact with each other. And that phenomenon is called emergence within a field called emergent strategies that I'm also really passionate about. And these concepts that just sort of manifest naturally through emergence are oftentimes seen as being very effective because they are kind of emerging naturally from whatever a space needs or what a person needs. So we could think of it sort of as a way of thinking about our skill of adaptation as human beings, as being very adaptable. So emergence is another idea to think about. Um, Rewilding is a term that's, I believe, can be applied to any aspect of thought or any practice, but it is nuanced and it's contextually informed. This graphic from Kate Willett, who is a reporter and thinker for Vox, made a whole wonderful series that unfortunately is behind a paywall, so I couldn't share more, but I had this one picture of it, that it's really helping things to return to a more natural state. Landscapes are always evolving, but the idea is to undo damage that post-industrial human intervention has had on the environment, is how she conceptualizes it. Um, so Chrisman and I were some of the first practitioners to question if rewilding could apply to people's spiritual lives or to culture and to communities the way that it does to the land. And what has emerged from our work, and we're seeing it in other people, is kind of this continually developing praxis or practice plus theory for working with communities and people. And that the mindset is really growing daily in a lot of different spaces. And we have a practice of whenever we see something about rewilding, we screenshot it and send it to each other. And we're like, look, another thing about rewilding that somebody came up with. And it's a wonderful way for us to practice also kind of a deconstructed idea of like ownership of ideas that, there it is important to give credit where credit is due of people who think of something and then teach it, but at the same time, sometimes there's this magic of humanity where things emerge naturally. And so we really believe in honoring that with rewilding. And I believe that Montessori itself can be seen as sort of an effort to rewild education. I kind of think of Dr. Montessori as that was her goal, is to really undo the damage that this post-industrial human intervention has had. And she was still in the midst of the Industrial Revolution when she was beginning her work. At the same time, it's important if we step out in that critical theory mindset that we think about Montessori education has existed entirely within the context of industrialization. So it was invented towards the end of the Industrial Revolution period, and thus I believe it has incurred potentially unexpected or unidentified damage or alterations, might be a more neutral word, from that pure intent of the method. How does the reality of our environment inform the way that we are doing Montessori? So despite the best intentions to resist those things, how have maybe is there ways in which values that are not aligned with Montessori have still slipped in and continued to inform, or things that we have felt pressure that we can't adapt against, constraints. We're going to talk a lot about the constraints that keep us from adapting our environments and programs. So I really do feel that while Montessori itself is rewilding this larger educational ecosystem, that also there is work to rewild Montessori, and that that's vitally needed at this moment to construct the features that we need for our learners and for the communities of parents and practitioners that we serve, and to really frame, I think, just what this next era, however much time you want to think of, the next century of Montessori education might look like, that we can think about rewilding as a helpful frame of looking at that. So to rewild is to remove imposed structures and allow things to develop according to their natural tendencies. In a permaculture context, it might be jackhammering up a parking lot that doesn't need to be there anymore, and then allowing the earth to grow up from where that parking lot was. But we're talking about schools, not parking lots. So, what does this mean for our schools? And really, this is an invitation for us to question what imposed structures are in place in our schools. And when we think about imposed structures, we mean things that don't naturally occur on their own. So, I mean, schools don't naturally grow up from the earth, but to educate children does seem to be a natural tendency of human communities, and a fundamental human need to learn. And therefore, schools have emerged to satisfy that need, but we could think of that as an artificial thing. We have constructed this, so it's that supernature rather than nature itself, as Dr. Montessori would describe. So we can think about tuition, how we approach tuition. It's technically not natural. It's something we've created or inherited. The way we handle move-up schedules, methods of communicating with parents, approaches to discipline and behavior, approaches to what parent involvement looks like in school. Technically, I'm a big fan of this saying, and I tell it to my staff a lot, and they're always unwrapping new layers of what I mean when I say we can do whatever we want. And they get to discover really just how much I mean that at times. And they're like, wait, we can actually do whatever we want if we can find a way to move forward that still satisfies the needs. So these are just some things that we can think about as these sort of imposed structures that could look anyway if we wanted them to. And so then what is stewardship? It's another term I'm very passionate about. Merriam-Webster defines it as the careful and responsible management of something entrusted to one's care. It is not my school. However, I might, in my defensiveness, want to claim that and protect it. It's the school I'm caring for, it's the school I'm stewarding. But ultimately, all of these wonderful children and the families who bore them, all of them, they don't belong to me. I'm caring for them for a period of time. And so, what I would define for my upper elementary students, because we never called them jobs in my classroom because they don't get paid. We never called it volunteering because it wasn't exactly optional. So, what do we call it? We call it stewardship. We're caring for something which is not ours with the same love and devotion as if it was. We're taking care of this classroom as if it is ours, and we're the ones intended to care for it. In the same way, it's our school, it's our neighborhood, it's our nation, it's our world. It's not ours, it's none of ours. But we are in this really, I believe, a divine mystery of why we're here is to learn how to take care of something and as if it was our own, as a real manifestation of our call to love and to serve one another and the place where we live. Um, so then examining our present moment. Ah, after all this natural pictures, bar graphs and numbers on screens. When we think about now that I live in the DMV area and so many of my parents work in the government and in all these important jobs that I'm always amazed at, it's amazing how much numbers on the screen like this impact the way that I do my work every day taking care of children. When political policies are enacted, when the stock market goes down, all these things actually, I feel it very much more so than I ever would have, I think, if I was still teaching on the West Coast where I'm from. So, examining our present moment. Um, Many of us might be familiar with the term late stage capitalism. I'm interested by a show of hands. Has anybody heard this term before? Couple. Yeah. So it's interesting because what we're going to talk about is actually late stage capitalism, as you may have heard of it, is actually a misnomer. It's a misapplied term. If you Google late stage capitalism, and you read a source text from a capitalist thinker, it's going to be very different than what I'm going to describe. But what we're going to describe is a socially agreed upon meme, which is a unit of cultural transmission. Don't know if you knew that. It's the social equivalent of a gene. A meme is a unit of cultural transfer. So every time we post those funny pictures on our Facebooks, social medias, we're actually transmitting cultural code to one another. And it's actually a linguistic term. So late stage capitalism is understood to refer to a generally agreed upon reality, and I'm going to frame that it is a uniquely Western and dare I say American reality. So we always have to think about that somebody watching this who is operating in a space from a different country might not relate to any of these things. Um, but it's generally understood to refer to things like absurd monetization. So we're hearing proposals about having to pay for a subscription to use the heated seats in your car that you're already paying what used to be a house cost for. Absurd monetization. I remember when you could buy Microsoft Word on a CD and you owned it for life, and now they want me to pay a subscription for it for the rest of my life. So this monetization, how much can we extract capital out of a service that used to be owned? It can refer to the mass corporate ownership of single-family homes, large-scale corporations that are purchasing homes and then renting them back to single families that they were built for at a higher rate to make profit. Digital price tags. That's the new frontier of talking about will a store be able to in real time adjust the price of bottled water as the temperature slowly increases You can't catch the guy running down trying to change the tags. That's easy to spot. And but digital ones that change by a fraction of a penny every moment, it's harder to trace. And overall, this kind of feeling of gradual yet seemingly intentional elimination of an affordable means of living, let alone the classic American dream. More and more people feel that that is impossible, and they will oftentimes say because of late stage capitalism. And childcare costing the same as, if not more, than a college tuition. I often think about that, that people pay sometimes twice over for college before they even get to college. And how are we doing that? It's amazing feat that people are doing it. But this is kind of all of these things can be thought of as aspects of late stage capitalism. And all the while, parents are struggling to maintain balance, care for their children in positive ways, more positive ways than they might have felt cared for or seen people around them care for their children, and find support systems to help them. What I don't have here, but also what I talk about, is that the reality is that a majority of people in America are not regularly attending a faith space where oftentimes Americans used to draw a sense of community from. And we're also not many people are part of the old Elks Lodge or the Moose Lodge or the Rotary Club, things that we used to just be a big staple of our lives, are not as much. And so young families are really struggling to find, where do I draw community from? And preparing for this, I didn't include it also, but an interesting study is that while around 50% of Americans are fortunate enough to have at least one of their child's grandparents living within a 10-mile radius, the other half of Americans have grandparents that live at least 50, if not over 200 miles away. So there's a huge disparity being experienced by families today of some people have grandparents like at the touch of a button, they can be there to help. And then another vast amount of Americans are in a totally polar reality. So that's another thing that has changed as well. So I believe that part of our work as leaders is to pay attention to changes in the job market, research statistics on economic conditions, like I just cited that one, to better understand our present moment and to challenge our misconceptions. I honestly, when I was looking into that grandparent thing, I expected it to be more people living without grandparent support. So I was pleasantly surprised that 50% do. So I'm always having my misconceptions challenged and finding ways for our schools to be adaptive and resilient to unexpected changes. I tell people, again, working in the DMV, unfortunately, I don't have the luxury of turning off the news because watching the news helps me to know what one of my children's families might be going through in the moment. And it might explain why a parent is showing up and dropping off and being on the verge of tears, and how I can do that kind of emotional triage for the people that I'm caring for. So we really do need to pay attention to these as much as we insulate our communities and try to keep the peace and provide that kind of island of harmony for people to come to, and especially our children. We also have at times the difficult job of really examining and paying attention and not turning an eye. I'll never forget a moment at a school that I worked at where we were hosting a parent education night, and the details kept getting pushed off by the administration until it was 5 days before we were going to have the event. And they finally put it out. And I said, of course, leading out, I said, we have to provide childcare. We got to provide childcare. People can't come if there's no childcare. And I'll never forget somebody at the school and the head of school saying, well, if they really cared, they'd find childcare. And I said, well, but the reality is, I'm just old enough to remember going to church, and there was plenty of adolescent teenage girls that were at my parents' beck and call who wanted to be babysitters, but that's it feels like a relic of the past to have that. And so finding babysitting is such a feat. So we really have to think about those things. Um, it's also to examine and appreciate the ways in which family models are evolving. So again, like that statistic about we can't always expect that grandparents are going to be there, aunts and uncles are going to be there, because increasingly people are having to move sporadically for work. especially here in the DMV. So many homes are for sale, so many families are being separated just from economic necessity, not to mention, and we always have to remember the people that are not fortunate enough to be part of our Montessori communities who are being separated for far worse, especially immigration status. We have to understand what drives parents and what they need to better support their children. And we need to examine what children truly need in order to thrive, not simply hold on to what used to work. As tempting and comforting and frustrating as it can be to be like, but this is what it used to be, and it was so much better when we had those support systems. My belief, my personal belief, is that we're living in late stage capitalism and we are watching those systems fade away, and we have to be adaptive. Meanwhile, the status quo tells us that we have to stick with what works. The people that are benefiting from these changes are still marketing the old standard or the old ideal that we should aspire to. And what I believe that happens in terms of social media messaging and other tacit forms of communication is that it creates this inner dissonance that oftentimes I'm seeing my young parents feeling like there is something deeply wrong with them because they're not able to attain what used to be attainable. They're doing everything they can, but they're facing roadblock after roadblock. And what's interesting as younger generations are now the parents, and I can relate to them because I did not mention I am one of the few and first Gen Z Montessori heads of school. And so I'm actually younger than most of the parents I'm serving, which is also surreal in some ways, but it helps I grew up in a bit of a time capsule of a home. So I can still get by. But really, I'm seeing that just that pressure to be perfect, that pressure to do the right thing and have those Instagram worthy moments. And I think it's really important also to remember that those ideals or those mindsets, babies are not born aware of Instagram and Facebook, which means that it was given to them, it was marketed to them, and it has become a part of life. And so I think it's also really important as we talk about the challenges facing young parents that we don't accidentally focus our frustrations, our natural frustrations at the people who are also being subjected to the reality of the pressures of social media, the pressures of performance, that's what we have grown up with. And it was not really known, and it's more known now, and it's wonderful to see pushback against those things. But the status quo tells us, don't change anything. No, don't change the way you're running your school. The right families, Montessori is for every child. It's not for every family. I've heard that lots of times. We cannot lean on that. But that is what's being told to us. And so we have to really think about those things. What works is a model that's rooted in maximizing capital profit while trying to minimize effort, which is not a model that centers the universal flourishing of humanity. I do think it's important to think that there is a bell curve, and capitalism has, we can talk about an incredible amount of benefits for at least some people. And that there is this kind of bell curve where it's like, oh my goodness, it's getting better and better and better and better. And then we have this moment where ultimately we live on a finite planet with a finite amount of resources. And it gets to that other side of that bell curve. And we're kind of there where we can still extract profit, but it's for less and less people gaining that profit. And what I have found as I've shared is that parents are really craving community. And in our hectic world, school can provide an opportunity to create a holistic space for families to belong to, especially at least for the first 5 years. My school does not go into elementary. Hopefully, one day it will. But for now, my goal as a leader is to provide the strongest foundation for the child and the parents for the first 5 years, which we know are the most important to a child's development. So some simple things that, I'm finding work is finding ways to have low lift gatherings. So not too much effort, not too many hoops to jump through for play and connection. Um, Providing childcare and dinner when asking parents to come for events. I always open up an opportunity to give a suggested donation of a few dollars to offset the costs. What has happened after a year of doing that, probably 10 plus events, is that not everybody donates, but the ones who do donate enough to cover and then some to actually where I'm like, when I look at it, our back to school nights are breaking a very slight profit, but albeit a profit, because the open invitation and the extension of generosity allow and the vulnerability of saying we want to provide this service actually seems to inspire people to be more open and generous with what they have and give back to the community in ways that I think used to be a lot more common when we had community more readily available. Eliminating obstacles to the development of community, trying to think about how are the ways that we're setting up our processes of drop off and things. Are we cultivating opportunities for small touch points between one another as parents and as the school that we have a moment of humanity for a smile? It doesn't have to be a streamlined, perfect Henry Ford brand drop off experience. How could we find ways, even if it was reminding our staff to make sure that we give a friendly wave to the parents, or something to add a little bit of humanity, even if it's impossible to have parents coming out and coming to the door for pickup. Providing opportunities for parents to check multiple boxes for their needs. That's something I've found. We'll talk if we have time about an example of things that I've done that really it's like parents want opportunities to connect with each other. They also express feeling difficulties of finding time for their own self-care or their own self-betterment. And so one thing that I've done is like a book club that is for parents to connect, and it's at a restaurant so that you can have a nice meal that you can treat yourself to as self-care. And we're also going to be reading a self-help book that is about adults, not about how to be a better parent, because I also try to emphasize that our parents were people before they had children, and they still are people. They still matter beyond their identity as a parent. And so our work must not simply provide parents with the positive feelings associated with community. That is something I do think I was thinking about as I prepared for this, is that it can be tempting to think of it as of, oh, we'll do this thing and it'll be amazing and parents will feel so happy and connected, and then they'll totally re-sign their enrollment agreements for next year. And it is not untrue that it is a wonderful benefit and a plus. And I will admit that I have those thoughts of like, and also I don't have to worry about enrollment as much because people are here. But that also can't be the only motivation. And I think sometimes that's where schools and school leaders have difficulty, is that that's a very real need that we have as leaders that motivates our thinking, and that's totally natural. But I think there's a certain aspect that can be felt on the other end of like, do they mean it? Or are they just trying to get me to sign my re-enrollment agreement? We have to make sure that we really are committing to these beliefs and values because they are good things to believe and value. And rather, in order to pursue the liberation of humanity, I think the children that we serve and the children of tomorrow, our work has to pursue that with gladness and singleness of heart to remove the obstacles to Montessori education. We have to try to look at our structures and how we are building our schools and maintaining our schools and evolving our schools. How can I get this gift, this aid to life, to the most people as possible? Um, how can I do that? And how can I do that with love? Um, is kind of something that I want to leave with you. So I really do think beyond these moments that I talked about, this means finding ways to lower cost for families, increasing the efficacy of our education model so that parents feel better served, and providing opportunities for that holistic, continual development of the family. The family, I believe, is a larger unit of life that is also pursuing continued self-construction. Every child is constructing themselves, but the family is a being as well, with its own needs, its own tendencies, and its own self-constructive rhythms. And I think that's the mystery that we're invited to explore together, is how do we help these families develop? And the best good for our world will be if we can get the most families into our schools as possible. And so the antidote to the crippling strain that these families face in this late stage capitalist, which as school communities I think we have to champion, is the increase in that tangible community and manifest it in real ways. that alleviate the symptoms and the root causes. And so these are some very big pictures. This isn't my inviting you into what I call, what other people also call imagination activism, where we have some structured time where we just ask the big what if, and we don't think about the critique. We don't think about the, yeah, but that wouldn't work. So some things that we could do, what we could think about. How do we create systems in which families and practitioners can satisfy their fundamental needs through the school community the way that people used to do through faith communities, and other community structures? How might we invest unused land for food production to provide sustainable, healthy food for families at low or even no cost? At my school, people who finished their enrollment process for this upcoming year back in November came back this summer for our events to prep and were amazed because the parents came together and turned our campus into a veritable Garden of Eden. And they built the boxes and they helped us and we did it and it was it's now a beautiful garden. And when we pick the vegetables, we give them away because you helped us do this and this is your food, this is your school, and it's okay. We can afford, like, it's not a matter of how do we maximize the profits. So do you have a large patch of grass? Grass is the one of my least favorite things that you could turn into some garden boxes, and even if you just get a couple cucumbers out of it, those can really actually brighten the day of parents, and create moments of learning at home. Creating new ways in which families can pay for their child's Montessori education. I know of a fabulous community Montessori school, that is working in an incredibly impoverished community in a very rural space, and they understand that their work is to provide this education for their community, and that their community, on average, their median income is around $20,000 to $30,000 a year. And so, how can we make this possible? But oh, that dad knows how to build a fence. We need a fence. How much would you normally charge somebody to build a fence? About $8,000. That's how much our tuition is. Build us a fence and your child gets to come for a year. And in that moment, we've been able to bypass the constraints of capital. Both parties benefit greatly, and it didn't require the exchange of money. It was rather more of a commerce. It was more like how people have operated for a much greater portion of human anthropological history. So, how might we find ways for families to pay for their education? Something else I'm really passionate about is developing parent-first hiring structures that create systems of interdependence. So, what might it look like to prioritize? Is there a parent who would like to meet the staffing need before we put out the call to the larger community? How might it be better if a parent could come to the same place where their child is learning, do their work, and not have a grueling commute across town to pick up their child? How much more positive could that child's first 5 years be if they had all of that time for quality time with their parent that they didn't have to spend commuting at the end of the day? Re-examining, this one's hard, systems of unsustainable hierarchical compensation that aren't tied to tangible production. I do think it's important that if we're going to operate in a capitalist mindset, everything is tied to the means of production. And so, therefore, is the amount that you are making correlating to the amount of benefit that you are providing to the school? And really examining, yes, everybody needs to make a livable wage. And so, how do we share these resources equitably? And still honor the fact that, as head of school, I work later, longer, more than any of my staff. I would never want my staff to work the hours that I work. So, yes, understandably, I do make more than my staff. But at the same time, what's the percentage of that? Is it three, five, six times what my staff are making, or is it more balanced? Am I making enough that I'm okay? And I would rather these resources go to someone else who needs them more. Another wonderful thing that could be really explored would be to implement shared housing models that invest school capital into nearby housing, into nearby accessible real estate that can still use downstairs areas, as a primary classroom while the upstairs provides an affordable living space for the teacher leading that classroom. What might that look like? It could look however you decide, however you might dream of making it happen. Um, and with all of these things, these are just ideas, and these are intended for us to really just think about, huh, what if? Or, wish for the moon and then think about how do we get there. And so, speaking of how do we get there, how do we create these new worlds of being? Well, I have a way of thinking about adult imagination. We think about this work of the child, of constructing their imagination, and we think about purposeful work. So, what does purposeful imagination look like? It's really similar to standard goal setting, I think, but it's a way that I was thinking about this. And so, whatever the problem is, whatever the difficulty, however small or enormous, you choose to look at it yourself or with your community, these four steps can help to guide. We can assess. So, we can assess the problem before us and we assess its nature, what seems to be causing this difficulty. I've been spending essentially the entire year and before I started this work of thinking the problem is that parents feel disconnected. And I've been assessing the why. Why do they feel disconnected? It's a really big, it's a lot of myriad of things. Okay, well, what's one thing, and that's where we get to create solutions. And hopefully these are through collaborative discussion with all the people that are impacted by the difficulty. We can compare what we thought of. Oh, you thought of that. I thought of this. And both of those things are valid. It's not who has the best idea. We have to try to, it should only be looking for the best idea in the sense of the most efficacious, the most helpful idea, not, well, Mr. Frank is the head of school and what he wants to do is what we're going to try first as a default. No, that's why I have my team of parent leaders as I run all my ideas past them. What would you think if I said this was what was happening tomorrow? And sometimes they're like, no, don't do that. And I'm like, right, this is why I keep you all close. So we talk about it together and we create possible solutions. And then it's implementing. Attempt to implement the created alternatives in good faith, meaning we're all going to try our best. We're going to try not to grumble as we walk through the desert for 40 years. We're going to try with our best heart to do the thing and over a sustained period of time. I'm sure we're all familiar in some way or another that you can't diet for one day or go to the gym for one day or set a new professional goal for one day and it didn't work perfectly, so that was a horrible goal and I'm not doing it. On to the next goal. That's what politicians who set curriculum for public schools do. They try it for one year and it doesn't work, and so then they get a new curriculum. And what makes it so hard to be a public school teacher. So we have to implement it for a sustained period of time. And then reflect. Again, in good faith. Discuss the results. What happened when we tried the book club? What happened? We did it over 6 months. Did people feel better? Did it feel like a good investment of time? Should we try something different? Should we change the way we did it? And we try to find at least an ideal level of change. It might not be perfect, but have we gotten it to a point where we feel like that's no longer a huge drain on our capacity that we can then focus in on other things, or other priorities? So assess, create, implement, and reflect. Like I said, it follows, I think, a pretty standard goal setting practice, but that just remember that that can be really implemented on a collective scale, either with a thought partner or a whole community. And so, like I said, we talked about parents and they determined they wanted to know more about Montessori. They wanted to have more time to open up a book. I mean, this was really starting the book club was spurned by a woman, a mother who truly broke down in tears one evening at pickup and said, I don't even have time to read a book anymore. It's so hard to be a mom. And I thought, okay, I've got to do something to help, this. How do we do this? And they also wish that they had time for new adult friendships. So after talking at a parent leadership dinner, we decided that we brainstormed we're going to do a parent book club at the restaurant People get a nice meal, they can treat themselves, but also read and talk and build connections outside of their identity of parents. We're going to implement it. I'll let you know how it goes. So we're starting on September 8th, and we're going to see, and we're going to try to measure. Is there a positive outcome for parents who participate in good faith? Did they feel more sustained? And then we're going to reflect and see how we move forward from that. So these 4 steps of purposeful imagination hopefully are a tool that you might think about when you try to solve your next hurdle, your next obstacle. And this quote I really like from Dr. Montessori in the Advanced Montessori Method: the power to imagine always exists, whether or not it has solid basis on which to rest and materials with which to build. But when it does not elaborate from reality and truth, instead of raising a divine structure, it compresses the intelligence and prevents the light from penetrating. So I think about, what foundation do we provide for the imagination of all the members of our community? Um, and so that we can have this divine structure rise up that helps edify and dignify the people that we're serving. And like I said, the possibilities are endless. They depend on each unique community and its needs. I mentioned before that field of emergent strategies, and something that emergent strategies says is that a one size fits all approach not only doesn't work, it's like physically in the fabric of reality impossible to work. What works for my school in Montgomery County, Maryland, will not work for a school in South Africa or in China or in Denmark. All of these things, there's different rules, there's different circumstances, different environments, all of these things. And so trying to get one approach that blankets over all, it's a natural desire to want that, but it's really actually community models work best when they are designed, implemented, and maintained by the people in that community. Emergent strategies has emerged heavily in the community of Detroit that has largely been economically abandoned by the federal and state governments. And the people living in Detroit have really had to think about, well, we still live here. Detroit still exists. And luckily for Detroit, an immense amount of the forward thinkers of emergent strategies live in the Detroit area. And so it's amazing to see what has been created through imagination activism. Um, I do think what precedes all of this is building of authentic trust between parents, staff, and children. I can tell you firsthand that I had all of these dreams that I'm telling you about now from before I came to my school. But if I had come out and back to school night and said, we're going to do this, and if I had told them, we're going to build a fence and we're going to build this sun sail and gardens and we're going to become this and that, like everybody would have freaked out and it would not have worked. Instead, we said we have to just trust the process, and I have to first work as a servant to all of these people and to truly mean it. And with that, I want to share 2 quotes from, this is the first place I'm sharing this, um, my forthcoming book, Rewilding Montessori, Cultivating Schools Through Compassionate Stewardship, is in the process. And I have 2 quotes that really, I think, I wrote in the spirit, especially of John Snyder and his idea of building the bridge of trust with parents. Was a real big impact on me as a Montessorian. And so the parent, like the child, must be able to rest confidently in an assurance felt inwardly about the prepared adult, an assurance that is made manifest through our good thoughts, our good words, and our good deeds. The parent in time will become aware, either gradually or spontaneously, of an inner serenity and say to themselves, this guide truly cares deeply, not just for my child, but for my well being as well. It is as if he truly believes that our shared existence and fate is bound together. It's as if he means to ensure that we always help one another in living life to the fullest. That's, in my mind, that's my goal. for parents to say to themselves. Not just, my child's not bleeding, they're learning their ABCs, it's fine, it's out of my mind. I don't want parents to put it out of their mind.
Right.
I love when parents come to the school and they say, I don't want to leave. This is where I want to be.
Right.
That's how we, because then we're speaking to the inner child. We're
Mhm.
speaking to those needs of the inner child that's still there. And then we have given such care to the normalization of the child, but we've done little to help bring about the normalization of the community. It's the community we must
Mhm.
also prepare, for that is the environment that the self-constructed adult will grow up into.
Mhm.
We have to ask ourselves, what is waiting now for the child? If we do nothing for the world, then the child is working in vain, they toil in vain, and our work is empty. Further,
Mhm.
where will the parents go when the child is grown? Who is to care for them, to show them gratitude for the great gift of bringing about the next generation of our species through their love and sacrifice? Surely it is we who must act upon all of this. And so, with that, I'm so grateful for all of you. And with what limited time we have, if there are any questions or
Oh, Frank,
thoughts,
there were so many points tonight that I just got chills listening to you speak, and the beautiful message that you've brought us tonight of hope and of community and collaboration.
thank you so
Something
much. Appreciate
we
that.
really need in our world right now.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I appreciate it. I will say it. It's so exciting, speaking of emergence, to see how just to see how many people are talking about these things. It's kind of that
Mhm.
emergence. I mean, lots about the
Yeah.
prepared adult, lots about that preparation. And oh, I love which I'm just seeing now the chat. I love that, William. In what way can we? Yeah, yeah, and hope for the present and the future. Absolutely.
I heard that years ago from somebody and I've hung on to it. So when somebody says it can't be done, not true. In what way can we? So
Right.
here's your book coming out, Frank.
Hoping for 2027. That is the hope. I'm still working on it, but
And
it's the dream is coming closer.
Well, I hope you'll come back when the launch is closer. We'd love to hear more from you
Yes,
and to
absolutely.
support your book. I want to order one right now.
I know I was like, oh, I'm gonna show this, but I was like, oh, but it's not ready yet. But still.
what's
Well,
your,
please
can you
stay
put
in
your
touch.
contact information in the chat or something?
Yes, absolutely. I'll go ahead and type my personal email. And I do occasionally write, I have a Substack that's called Rewilding Montessori. I write there sparingly when the spirit leads me. But you can read some more of my work there. And yeah, I just really, really, I'm so, so grateful to all of you for being here and sharing, this space with me. And I know that I could see in your eyes and in your responses that it resonated, and I know that I'm sure by the fact that you all are here, that you're doing wonderful work wherever you are and however you're doing this Montessori work.
Well,
Well, and just to remind, oh, sorry, Bill, go ahead.
I was just going to be a smart rear end. I was just going to say, Lindsay made us come. No.
Maybe you, Bill. But Bill's one of my dear friends, and we just love all the wisdom that Bill brings to the room as well.
I
And
can feel
I
that.
wanted to remind everyone that the recording of tonight's presentation will be on the Sarasota University YouTube channel.
Yes.
So I know I'm going to rewatch the recording because there's so much information that you shared with us, Frank, and I really want to hear it all again and really um, just mull over so much of this information gives me hope, and I really appreciate that. Also, for those of you who might be interested in professional development credit, when you go to the Sarasota YouTube channel, you will have an option to fill out a survey there, and you can get credit for tonight's attendance. So, again, thank you, Frank, for all of your words of wisdom, and thank you to all of our attendees and attendees in the future who will be watching the recording in the future. I hope everyone has a great rest of your evening and a fabulous school year. Thank you for being here. Thank you, Frank, and we'll look forward to your book launch.
Thank you so much.
Take care, everybody.